For this one, we're going to get into just the tip of the history of an illness known as the sweating sickness. So if you're ready, let's go. Now, a lot of people aren't aware that the sweating sickness was so deadly that it once killed 15,000 people in England in just 6 weeks, but we still don't know what caused it. And the symptoms, they just came on suddenly. There was chills, fevers, headaches, and of course a terrible drenching sweat. The so-called sweating sickness reared its head a number of times in the 15th and 16th centuries, killing thousands and terrorizing many more. The disease first emerged in 1485, shortly after Henry Tudor's victory in the War of the Roses, with a mortality rate of between 30 to 50%. It would come to define the Tudors' years and would change the course of history. And as we know, the sweating sickness, it spiked with the rise of the Tudors and would come to also define the family's reign in more ways than one. Mention of the sweat was first documented in the early 1480s, and according to the National Library of Medicine, the Dutch scholar Erasmus reported it in 1483, and a similar disease was recorded in northeast England in June of 1485. Shortly before the Battle of Bosworth Field, Lord Stanley reportedly excused himself and his men from the fight by claiming that they had the sweat, but instead of bowing out of the battle, he switched sides from King Richard III to Henry Tudor. And of course, since Lord Stanley controlled 30% of the king's army, his betrayal was devastating to the royal cause. The War of the Roses ended with Richard's death and Henry's ascension as King Henry VII, and it marked the beginning of the English sweating sickness. Now, the battle was hardly over when Henry's troops started to suffer from the sweat, and whether it came from French mercenaries in Henry's ranks or from Rhodes much earlier is unknown, but the danger of the disease quickly became clear. Those who contracted it suffered from headaches, delirium, chills, and relentless sweat. And within 24 hours, 30 to 50% of the people who got sick died. Also, with preparations for Henry's coronation underway, London was likely more packed than ever, and the new terrifying disease quickly spread, and by the time it petered out at the end of October of 1485, 15,000 people had died. But the sweating sickness, as we know, would indeed return. The English sweating sickness reappears several times in the 16th century. Outbreaks took place in 1508, 1517, 1528, and 1551. Henry VII's son and heir Arthur here is believed to have died from the sweating sickness just before his 16th birthday in 1502. Now, because of this whole fiasco, it put Arthur's younger brother Henry in line to be king, and that meant that Henry would have to marry Arthur's bride, Catherine of Aragon. So Henry VIII became king in June of 1509, in between the sweating sickness outbreaks of 1508 and 1517. Now, side note, whenever I look at this guy, all I think is of the musical Six, and if you haven't seen it, it is excellent. Now, alarm about the disease was not just confined to London. In 1528, the sweating sickness also spread to other countries in Europe. Cases were reported in Germany, Belgium, Scandinavia, Lithuania, Poland, and the Netherlands, and Russia, but especially rattled King Henry VIII. Now, in only the fashion of King Henry VIII, as you can imagine, he took extreme measures to avoid getting sick. The king reportedly slept in different beds every night, broke up his court, and spent the summer of 1528 moving from safe house to safe house in the countryside. When his mistress, Anne Boleyn, fell ill, Henry VIII was so anxious about catching the sweat that he kept his distance. With all of that said, what in the HE double hockey sticks could have caused it? Well, different theories, of course, have emerged. Scholars have suggested that influenza, scarlet fever, anthrax, or typhus could have caused the sweating sickness. Others, though, they believe that it could have been caused by the hantavirus, which can be spread by rodents and produces similar symptoms. But no one disease has been definitively linked to the sweating sickness. In the end, the sweating sickness is as mysterious today as it was over 500 years ago, when it appeared in a rush of aches, deliriums, and drenching sweat and killed many of its victims within 24 hours.